She had tears in her eyes as she took my hand. "I need your help. Can I rely on you?" Her eyes were a bit teary as she said that. "Of course, let me do everything I can do for you. My name is Alex. I'm 23, just graduated from college, and have been working at the headquarters of a fairly large manufacturing company for a year now." As usual, while looking for a seat in the company cafeteria, I glanced around. Suddenly, I heard a voice from behind. "Hey!" It was my colleague, Ryan. We joined the company at the same time and are in the same department. Naturally, we became good friends. "Are you still looking for the girl from the orientation?" "I wasn't really looking, it's just a habit." "No, that was a lie. I was looking. It's been a year since I was assigned to the headquarters. I had given up on finding the person I was looking for, thinking she didn't work in this office. But I couldn't help but keep searching. The girl from the orientation that Ryan mentioned. On the day of the orientation, I had just moved from a rural area to the city, and I was full of anxiety. What if the train was delayed? What if I ran into some trouble? What if I had an accident? Thinking about all these things made me incredibly anxious, and I always arrived early to new places. On the day of the orientation, I arrived at the venue 2 hours early. I checked the entrance to the venue and felt relieved. I looked around for a place to kill time and suddenly became worried about my belongings. I had checked the specified items to bring multiple times. But did I really not forget anything? Suddenly overwhelmed with anxiety, I rummaged through my bag right there. And then, I made a mess. Fortunately, there weren't many people around. I hurriedly bent down to gather my scattered belongings. Then, a pair of beautiful high heels appeared in front of me. I looked up to see a stunning woman with long and silky hair picking up my scattered items. "Are you okay?" she asked, giving me a slight smile. Her face looked divine, like a goddess. Unable to look directly at her face, I quickly looked down and replied, "Yes, I'm fine," while gathering my things and stuffing them into my bag. I felt her chuckle at my clumsiness. Then she picked something up and exclaimed in surprise, "Oh, are you a new employee at our company?" When I looked up again, she was holding my dropped employee ID card. "Ah, yes. I mean..." Before I could continue, she said, wide-eyed, "You know the orientation doesn't start for another 2 hours, right?" and looked at me. I was just anxious, so I got here way too early. I smiled weakly, and she returned a gentle smile. "That's really early. What were you so worried about?" Pierced by her beautiful smile, my mind went blank. And then my mouth started talking on its own. Like, the train might stop, or I might feel sick, or I might run into someone who needs help, or various things. As I rambled on, she burst into laughter. "Don't you get tired always thinking like that? Are you the type who's bad at handling things?" Her teasing made me feel a bit self-deprecating. "Maybe so." Sensing my gloomy mood, she said, "Sorry, I meant you're just cautious," with a comforting tone. When I was feeling down and hanging my head, I felt a jolt on my back. She had slapped me hard on the back. "Starting today, you're one of our employees. Stand tall." As I blinked in surprise, she put her hands on her hips and said loudly, "Be cautious yet bold." She looked me straight in the eye as I stood there bewildered. That's one of our company mottos. Being cautious is important. But you need to be bold too. With that, she turned and headed towards the hall where the orientation would be held. "Thank you very much," I shouted after her. She looked back and said, "I look forward to seeing how much you'll grow," before striding off elegantly. I felt like my heart was seized. I wondered if I could work with such an amazing woman. The thought made my heart race. When I saw her again at the orientation reception, my heart jumped once more. So, she was here to prepare, I realized, feeling a bit foolish for not thinking of it earlier. There were a lot of receptionists, and my assignment was regrettably not hers. However, when our eyes met, she smiled at me. That smile knocked me out. I fell for her right then and there. Since she was handling the reception, I was sure she worked at this office, so I kept looking for her. Whether arriving at work, leaving, going to the restroom, or moving between meeting rooms, I always looked around for her. But I never saw her again throughout the whole year. Maybe she worked on a different floor or was in a different region. Our company has branches and subsidiaries not just nationwide but worldwide. I didn't even know her name. Though I had partly given up, I still habitually looked around for her. Lost in these thoughts, Ryan spoke to me. "Hey, they're looking for someone to go to Malaysia." He talked while munching on his food in the cafeteria. Ryan, being sociable, always chatted with me about various things. As someone who didn't talk much, I was often grateful for his company. Malaysia, huh? If I went there, I'd have even less chance of seeing her. Well, it's not something that concerns us first-year employees, Ryan said with a laugh, sipping his tea. A transfer, let alone one overseas. Those things seemed like distant future events. That's what I thought. At the time of that conversation in the company cafeteria. A few days later, I sat at my desk in shock, holding a piece of paper. It was a transfer order. To Malaysia. A newly established factory in a certain region of Malaysia. That's my next workplace. Several people had already been dispatched from the headquarters and other factories, but quality wasn't improving. So, they were looking for someone who could speak multiple languages. "Why, me?" I muttered, and a pale-faced Ryan nervously approached me. "It might be my fault." I looked at Ryan with a puzzled expression. The other day, I casually talked to Tom, our manager. He asked if I knew anyone who could speak multiple languages. I got nervous and I couldn't talk well in front of him. Right. Ryan, who usually talks a lot, becomes tongue-tied in front of our superiors. He often stumbles during meetings. Without thinking, I mentioned you. I said you were a returnee. That might be why. I had lived abroad due to my parents' work. It was during elementary school, but I lived in both the US and Germany. I had shared this with Ryan during one of our drinking sessions. It's not your fault, Ryan. I wrote it on my resume too. Considering it was on my resume, I couldn't believe Ryan's comment alone led to my transfer. However, Tom did say, I forgot he could speak multiple languages, so if Ryan hadn't mentioned it, I might not have been considered. But saying that would help no one. My transfer order wouldn't change, and Ryan would feel guilty. I forced a smile. Let's go out for a drink before I leave. Don't look so glum. This is a chance, right? I'll make a name for myself in Malaysia. Just don't become my subordinate when I get back, okay? Ryan's face brightened a bit. I wouldn't be able to see the girl from the orientation anymore, but it couldn't be helped. Even as the days to my departure drew closer, I still looked around for her but never found her. Maybe she's in Malaysia. I mused jokingly. A few months later, I finally landed in Malaysia. As always, I arrived at work an hour early on my first day. I figured the office wouldn't be open yet, so I'd have to kill some time. But when I looked, the office lights were on. Cautiously, I tried the door, and it opened easily. Entering quietly, I saw someone at a desk in the back. It looked like a woman. And a Japanese woman. I decided to greet her. Good morning. I'm the new. Following the advice of the girl from the orientation to be bold, I made sure to greet her loudly. But before I could finish, she shouted at me. I told you not to speak in that language. Even if I say this in English, you wouldn't understand, would you? How about it? I was stunned by her angry voice but managed to say something. Excuse me? What language are you talking about? A question mark floated in my head. Well, English. Well, so. Anyway. My voice shrunk, completely intimidated. But when she looked up in surprise, my eyes widened to the limit. No way. It's the girl from the orientation. I really met her in Malaysia. What were the odds? This had to be fate. However, my elation quickly deflated with her next words. Oh. They did mention someone from the US was coming today. Just great, at such a busy time. I don't have time to teach you. So just look at the manual lying around and introduce yourself at the factory or something. Was she really the same girl from the orientation? There was no mistake. On the day of the orientation, her hair was silky and straight, she wore a crisp suit, and her makeup was light but perfectly applied. Now, her hair was disheveled, she was nearly makeup-free, had dark circles under her eyes, and wore thick glasses she didn't have before. The prescription must be strong. The lenses are quite thick. As I stared blankly, she glared at me. Were you listening? What is it? Do you need something else? And why are you here so early? What time is it? It's 7 a.m. I got here too early. Oh, my name is Alex. Nice to meet you. I managed to introduce myself, and she turned back to her computer. Rachel. I'm the person in charge here. Nice to meet you, she said. Then immersed herself in work as if I wasn't there. In this newly established factory office, it was basically just Rachel and me. The rest of the staff worked in the adjacent factory. Most were local staff, with a few American employees. The American staff were only here temporarily and would return to the US once the factory was running smoothly. According to the American staff, the local workers were generally easygoing and didn't worry about the details, which often left Rachel stressed as she was tasked with improving the quality. Rachel had experience working in a factory, so she was particularly meticulous, which frustrated the local staff. Cultural differences seemed to create various misunderstandings. A few days later, I had started to communicate fairly well with the local staff. Since Rachel was busy with administrative work, I spent more time in the factory. One day, after finishing my tasks, I returned to the office. There's no way this can be over. Rachel was crying a little. I was shocked and asked, "What's wrong?" Startled by my presence, she quickly turned away. She didn't want to be seen crying. "It's nothing. If you're done, go home already." With her face turned away, she tried to chase me off in a strong tone. However, I was at my limit too. Rachel looked more worn out by the day. Her desk's trash bin was filled with empty energy drink bottles. "Is there anything I can help with?" "I'm here to support you, Rachel," I said, and her eyes flared up. "What could you possibly do? Even I'm struggling with this. Once this task is done, things will get easier, so just let me focus." She snapped, trying to shoo me away again. I noticed the manual she was working on was marked with sticky notes and underlines. Noticing my gaze, she sighed and explained in a sulky tone, "I'm translating this new machine's manual from German to English. It's full of technical terms. And I only speak English." Impulsively, I said, "I might be able to help with that." Rachel glared at me and stood up, her eyes leveling with mine. "You know." As she said this, she staggered and almost collapsed. I hurriedly caught her. She felt soft, but very thin. She quickly pulled away from my arms and sat back down in her chair. "Sorry. I wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. I don't understand it, but I do know that what she needs is rest. You're really exhausted. Please go home for today." "But..." Before she could argue, I cut her off. "I can speak German." Her tired eyes widened slightly. "I lived in Germany for a while. The technical terms are tough, but please let me do it. Please." I bowed deeply. Rachel held her head. "Don't shout, my head hurts." I panicked. She glanced at my flustered reaction and smiled faintly. It was the first time I saw her smile since coming to Malaysia. "Well, if you can handle it, it would help if you could make some progress. Based on what you do today, I might ask for your help again tomorrow." With that, she left the office. I turned to the thick manual and my computer. "Good morning." When I arrived 30 minutes early, Rachel was already there. She was staring at her computer with wide eyes. "Is it finished?" Seeing me, she skipped a greeting and exclaimed in surprise. "Yes. I only had a little bit left." Rachel's eyes widened even more. "A little bit. I thought this would take at least another week." I was happy to have reduced Rachel's burden by a week. I decided to suggest something I had thought of yesterday. It might be presumptuous, but can I translate this manual into Malay? Rachel frowned at my words. "What? Into Malay? Can you do that?" She looked skeptical. I'm not fluent, but a bit. When I answered modestly, Rachel questioned further. Who are you, really? I hesitated a little. I'm what's called a language geek. When I revealed this, most people backed off. Moreover, I like minor languages. Malay, Turkish, Tagalog, and since I'm in Southeast Asia, I'm studying Thai now. When I mentioned this, people usually distanced themselves even more. I had lived in the US and Germany during my elementary school years. Thanks to my parents' education, I could speak multiple languages to some extent. In Germany, many people spoke English, so I rarely had trouble communicating in English. But speaking German made my German friends happy. The joy of being able to communicate in the local language stayed with me, driving me to learn various languages. Even without plans to visit those places. Would Rachel also be put off by this? As I looked at her, she teared up and took my hand. I need your help. Can I rely on you? Her eyes were a bit teary as she said that. Of course, let me do everything I can do for you. Today, I was hosting a barbecue at the factory. Rachel, meals are ready. When I brought her meals, she was surprised. Hey! This has pork in it. That's not okay. Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country with various religions. About 70% of the population are Muslim Malays, so pork is generally avoided. Especially in this area with a high Malay population, it was very noticeable. It's okay. I cooked everyone else's on a separate grill. Don't you ever crave it sometimes? At that, I heard Rachel gulp. But, is it okay to eat in front of everyone? She looked around nervously. I smiled and reassured her. I got their approval. They even said it's okay to have some drinks. Alcohol is also generally avoided in this area. Everyone, really, thank you, it's thanks to you, Alex. She said, then took a bite of the pork with a grateful expression. I wanted to offer a taste of home, so I served it. Of course, there were other meats and vegetables too. She didn't know how much effort I put into getting the pork. While Rachel was busy translating the manual, I had gotten close to the local staff. I also realized that the tension between Rachel and the staff was due to the language barrier. In Malaysia, English is widely spoken. But some people struggle with it, especially in this predominantly Malay-speaking area. Though I had never spoken it, my Malay got a barely passable approval from the locals. So I started speaking Malay more. Even the American staff were surprised, and when detailed instructions were hard to convey, I tried using Malay. It was rare for the local staff to hear an American person speak their language, earning their trust. This was why I was sent to Malaysia just a year after joining the company. I had honestly listed all the languages I could speak on my resume. Both Rachel and the American staff felt left out when they couldn't understand the language being spoken around them, which created a barrier. Rachel's inability to communicate well became a major source of stress for her. She even began to suspect the locals were speaking ill of her in Malay, which made her more on edge. Then she became more and more irritable and even issued a decree, using Malay in front of me is forbidden. This only widened the gap between her and the local staff. I remembered being yelled at on my first day. Even though I greeted her in English, she shouted, "Don't speak to me in that language," leaving me confused. That language turned out to be Malay. I worked as a mediator to bridge the gap between both sides. The Malay manual was well received. I credited Rachel for it, which improved everyone's opinion of her. It's a secret from Rachel that I said to the local staff, Rachel feels lonely because she can't join the conversation when it's in Malay. The local staff started to enjoy Rachel's company, thinking, are American people really that lonely? Gradually, the gap between Rachel and the local staff began to narrow, and soon, while eating my homemade dishes, Rachel was happily chatting with the local staff in English. Rachel's hair had returned to the sleek, straight black it was when I first met her, and her makeup was flawless, making her incredibly beautiful again. I noticed a few staff members trying to flirt with her. As I pondered how to prevent that, Rachel came over to where I was cooking again. Not now, please. Because I probably smell really sweaty right now, so please don't come too close. I stepped back a little, but Rachel closed the gap. Hey! She leaned in close to my ear, filling me with embarrassment. Thank you, really. You've been such a help." Hearing those words, I blurted out, "Do you think I've grown?" Rachel looked puzzled. "Since when? Since you came here?" "If so..." I interrupted her before she could continue. "We actually met over a year ago, Rachel." I added a bit of suspense, but she didn't seem to catch on. "On the day of the orientation, you helped me with my stuff." Even then, I thought she might not remember, but she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, you're the guy who dropped all his stuff." I had no idea until now. I was relieved she remembered. "You told me you looked forward to seeing the improved me. Do you think I've grown?" Looking straight at her, I waited for her response. "The food is burning," she pointed out, causing me to panic. "What? Oh no." In my haste, I dropped the tongs. Rachel laughed at my clumsiness. "Maybe you haven't grown in that area." I had tried to look cool, but it wasn't working out. Feeling a bit down, I focused on dealing with the burnt food. Suddenly, Rachel leaned close. "You've become a handsome man." I couldn't look at her. My heart was pounding loudly. "I was really tough on you at first, but thank you for helping me," she whispered, still close to me. I served her a plate of meals with pork, not burnt this time. "Since the orientation, I've fallen for you. Please go out with me." I shouted my confession, making Rachel flustered. Everyone around us started watching. "Hey! That's embarrassing." Rachel was panicking. I echoed the words she had once told me. "Be cautious yet bold." I cooked the food cautiously. I'm confessing boldly. My loud voice got the local staff, who probably didn't understand English, all riled up and cheering. Even though the local staff probably didn't understand English, they cheered along, with some of the American staff apparently translating. Embarrassed by the attention, Rachel took the plate of meals and tried to hide her face with it. "You burned it earlier, where's the caution?" she replied in a small voice. "No need to point that out." Her voice grew even softer. "You know I have a pretty harsh personality, right? I love that about you too." Rachel hesitated. "I'm older than you, by quite a bit." "That sounds perfect." Rachel's ears turned bright red. Mine probably were too. "I want to get promoted. I came here right after the orientation. They said if I could improve the quality at this factory, I'd get a promotion. So I agreed immediately, that's why." It made sense that I couldn't find her if she came to Malaysia right after the orientation. "So, I'm not the type to settle down in a household." "Wait, household? Are you thinking about marriage?" I was overjoyed, almost jumping for joy. But Rachel didn't mean it like that. "No, I mean, forget it. Why would you want to marry someone as old as me?" Tears welled up in her eyes. Filled with affection, I couldn't help but say, "I'd love that. I want to marry you," and hugged her tightly. With my sweaty body. The crowd around us cheered louder. In my arms, I felt Rachel nodding her head repeatedly. I released her and looked into her eyes. Blushing and stammering, she said, "When you propose, please don't do it like this," pointing to the meals I had handed her when I confessed, pouting. "Does that mean she accepted my confession?" As I fell silent, she seemed to think I was waiting for her next words. "If you're okay with someone like me, please, take care of me," she whispered, then crouched down as if that was all she could manage. The surrounding crowd held their breath, watching. I raised my fist high in a victory pose. Everyone cheered loudly. The guys who had been eyeing Rachel looked a bit disappointed but gave me thumbs up. I thought I'd never see the girl from the orientation again. I was disappointed when I couldn't find her at the headquarters. I was devastated when I was sent to Malaysia. But here in Malaysia, we met again, and now everyone was congratulating us. If we had met at the headquarters, we might not have even had a chance to talk. In Malaysia, I was able to support Rachel, and we ended up together. The quality of the parts produced at the factory was improving rapidly. I might even be on the path to promotion myself. I had thought Ryan got me exiled. But now I was extremely grateful to him. I would bring back a ton of souvenirs when I returned to the US. Hopefully, I could introduce Rachel then. With these happy thoughts, I joined the circle of well-wishers around us.